Hello, my name's Kelly. I'm a CBT therapist and forensic psychologist. Today I'm going to talk you through a presentation about working with offending behaviours. So what I want to get out of this presentation is to introduce to you a range of psychological models that are really helpful when we are working with individuals who offend. Think about the treatment that is currently offered and the things that you could maybe incorporate in your treatment when you're working with offending behaviour, and to maybe explore some of the difficulties that we may experience as professionals when working with individuals who offend. To start off with, we have the risk, need, and responsivity model. So this was developed by Andrews, Bonta, and Hodge in 2010. This showed a massive change in working with offending behaviour. So we went from the notion of nothing works, nothing is going to help an individual change, to what works, what can we actually do to support this individual to make changes in their life. And then we have risk, needs, and responsivity. So with the risk, what that means is we want to match the offender's risk level to the level of service intervention that you are providing. So what this basically means is that some individuals may have a higher level of risk to themselves or to others, and therefore would need a higher intensity of treatment of an intervention. So making sure that that matches and is suitable for the individual. Then needs. So this is focusing on what the purpose of the program is. So is it reducing reoffending? And I'm thinking about what is the criminogenic need that we are trying to focus on, and we'll come to that a little bit later. But say, for an example, if it is theft, or if it is thinking about maybe substances that are intrinsically linked to their offending, making sure that whatever the intervention that is offered, that it does match what their needs are. And then responsivity. So this is ensuring that we match the kind of the mode and the strategies or the style of the intervention to the actual learning styles of the individual, and as well as their motivation or their readiness to change their behaviour. And this model underpins pretty much all of offender treatment programs, but also thinking about holding this in mind when we are working with individuals ourselves. Another model that is used within treatment is the Good Lives model. So with the Good Lives model, so the ward said in 2024 that we've been so busy thinking about how to reduce sexual crimes or other crimes that we've often overlooked a basic truth, and that is that recidivism may be further reduced through helping an individual to live better lives, and that's not simply by focusing just the risk factors. So what this means is that Ward and Stewart in 2003 argued that the most effective way to reduce risk is to give individuals necessary conditions to lead better lives, otherwise a good life. And it's not just teaching people about how to minimize their chances of being incarcerated or being in prison. And the primary aim of the treatment is to be able to give individuals the capabilities to be able to secure their personal and social goods, and we'll come on to the goods in the next slide, about ways, in acceptable ways, in addition to the reduction and management of risk. So it was no longer thinking about just the risk, it's a much more holistic way of looking at things. So here we have the different goods that are known within the good life. So you have life, inner peace, excellence in play, spirituality, pleasure, knowledge, creativity, community, excellence in agency, excellence in work, and relatedness. And what this means is that thinking about the risk, need, responsivity model, that our needs will often be the same. However, it's how we meet those needs that can lead us to engage in criminal activities. So thinking about that an individual may have pleasure. So that could be something that is a really important good for them. However, they may choose to engage in criminal behaviour to get that pleasure, or even looking at relatedness. that being related and connected to other people is really important, but then the people that they associate with are other people who maybe influence them to be involved in crime, or also people that are involved in crime themselves. And I think a really important note here is that some people that we work with, that we don't, some people that we work with, but also us, that we don't always know what we want. And sometimes what we may think is good for our clients is different to what they actually want. And that could be that they've maybe always been involved in criminal activity and they simply don't know alternatives, or that they don't know how to actually get those needs met in an alternative way. So as humans, we all have these goods and we all want to achieve them, but it's just that sometimes some people choose to engage in criminal behaviour to meet them. Not all of them. It could be that they're engaging in some of the other goods in a way that doesn't involve criminal behaviour, but some of them do. And if they do and they want to change, kind of going back to that motivation and that readiness, then that is where we would come in and potentially support an individual to make that change. So if we look at it in practice, that someone's needs or their goods could be about friendships, relationships, community, and maybe excellence. And their activities that they are engaging could be maybe drug abuse and offending behaviour. And then that leads them to relating to maybe to other criminals, or obviously having victims. But as I said, the needs will always be the same, but it's the activities that we want to look at, and it's about how we shift from one to the other. So if we hold that in mind, but then if we add in maybe a way that doesn't involve criminal behaviour, so needs are the same, but then the activities are different. So satisfying employment, playing football. And then because of that, they maybe relate to non-criminals and maybe have appropriate partners. So even though the needs are exactly the same, but it is those activities and the kind of the follow-on from those activities that are changed. And you can reflect upon this by yourself, going back to that slide and thinking, okay, what are my needs? How am I meeting them? Are there ways that I could maybe meet them that are better to me? We may not be engaged in criminal behaviour, or we may be, but we may be meeting those needs in a way that isn't entirely fulfilling for us. So that is one of the models really that looks at helping and supporting people to change that behaviour. And with the Good Lives model and the risk need responsivity model, they're the ones that are often underpin the treatment programs, but you can use them in treatment yourself. So thinking about what we actually look at in treatment, first of all, is kind of what is that motivation to offend? So why is an individual offending? What need is it meeting? Is it financial? Is it kind of that thrill seeking? Is it because that's kind of been the norm? But looking at what is the function, I think that's a really important question, is what is that function that the offending behaviour is meeting? What is the purpose of it? So, and once you do that, you can then look at what the motivation is for offending. And sometimes simply asking someone like, well, why did you do it? Oh, I needed to get money. Okay. So we can look at alternative ways, and then that easily links back into the Good Lives model. Looking at internal or external factors. So obviously internal are things within us, such as maybe having higher levels of impulsivity, or maybe substance use or low self-esteem. Then you've got external factors, so maybe the influence of the people, the environment that we're in, or the environment that we grow up in. So you're thinking about holding in mind those internal and external factors. We also look at improving victim empathy. So sometimes that when people are engaged in offending behaviour, they may not think about the consequences of their actions, or if it's maybe an offence against maybe a business or a company, that they don't kind of see the individual victims. But it's about being able to improve that there is going to be some sort of consequence of these actions, and then looking at, can there be any sort of empathy for the victim or the victims? We can either look at support for the victim, and that could be through restorative justice. So that is where the victim agrees to engage in conversations or sessions with the perpetrator. Urge surfing. So as I mentioned, sometimes with impulsiveness or that kind of that thrill-seeking behaviour, any sort of behaviour, there is an urge to do it before. It doesn't mean that everything is completely pre-planned, but there's going to be some sort of urge or some sort of trigger. So it's about being able to be mindful of, how does that urge feel within our body? What are the thoughts that are going through my mind before I make the decision to engage in offending behaviour? Once we can recognize that, we can look at what that urge is and how an individual can surf the urge, because urges for engaging in any sort of behavior, even if you've just got an itch and you really, really want to itch it, that urge will subside if you learn how to surf it. And that can be done by mindfulness, grounding techniques, a range of different areas, but it can be really helpful. And it can also be used in a range of other areas, such as substance misuse, even trilomania, kind of hair pulling, skin picking, dermatillomania. So it's about being able to recognize how that urge feels in our body or in our mind, and how we can surf it, how we can ride it out. Because an urge to do something, as I said, it won't last for long, normally about 20 or so minutes. If you can urge that, then the urge is going to subside. Looking at healthy relationships, and this could be romantic relationships, it could be familial relationships, it could be social relationships, and thinking about, okay, so what are those relationships? How are they helping you? How are they supporting you? What do they look like? And can we improve them in any way? And that may not be applicable to everyone. Some people could have really good supportive friends, family, a romantic partner, but they still choose to engage in offending behaviour. So even though I'm talking through these areas, obviously this list, there is so much more that could be put on this list, and not everything is going to be applicable to everyone. Then offence paralleling behaviour. Some people may engage in certain behaviour that is offence paralleling. So it may not be offending, but it could be similar. So such as risk taking. An individual may steal cars and go for joyrides, which is kind of their offending behaviour, but there could be other sort of risk-taking behaviour that isn't offending, but you can see the parallels. And it's about supporting an individual to see what those parallels are, but to look at, again, what is that need that behaviour is meeting? And can there be something that is more beneficial for you that doesn't involve offending behaviour or behaviour that could be harmful to you or to other people? Looking at reducing in denial and minimization. For some people, that it's really difficult maybe to admit or to see that there's been implications to their actions, or that it kind of been minimized. Oh, I didn't really mean to do it. And it's about supporting someone to actually think, okay, so what is the impact of doing that? Some people can deny things for years, and obviously some people are wrongly convicted. But it's about being able to explore that with an individual, and what is kind of the reasons for that denial or that minimization, and can we explore that a little bit more? Reducing cognitive distortion. So cognitive distortions are thoughts that would often almost like approve our offending behavior in our mind, or kind of give us rhyme or reason for doing it. So within that, it's about looking at what is that thought pattern that maybe is starting offending behaviour or is leading it to continue, and can we challenge it? Such as that, kind of with going back to the stealing cars, that I didn't see the person that owned the car, so it was fine. I wouldn't do it if there was someone there with the car. And then thinking about how we can change that slightly, or if thinking about, well, they deserved it. And think about, okay, so how can we change those thoughts? How can we manage those thoughts so they don't lead to an individual engaging in offending behavior? Sometimes there's that arousal, kind of that deviant, or kind of that the arousal, that fantasy, and this can be with sexual offending, or it could be with other sorts of offending, that there is some sort of either sexual arousal or just a physical arousal, kind of that buzz that an individual gets from engaging in deviant behavior. So being able to recognize that, and to be able to lessen that, maybe through grounding techniques, or engaging, as I said, in other behaviors, and give that feel good, maybe not the kind of the exact arousal that they're getting, but something that is more kind of pro-social or just not criminal. Then there's going to be a wide range of non-offence specific treatment goals. So within this, it could be things that they just want to achieve in life that aren't related to offending. And think about, okay, so how can we allow these to grow and to bloom? Of course, relapse prevention, so supporting an individual to not relapse either into offending, into substance use, any sort of unhelpful behaviour. And then making sure that they've got a plan maybe for high risk situations or times of the year that could be particularly risky that would make it more likely for them to return to their previous behaviour. And all through this, we'd be looking at motivational interviewing. So this is where you work with an individual to roll within a resistance that they may be presenting. It could be about supporting an individual with that ambivalence to change. And it's about really being not relentlessly positive, but being able to explore and having those difficult conversations, but not to be finger pointing or telling one off, but just to be curious and exploring. So that non-judgmental approach is really, really important. And of course, when we're looking at treatment, it being evidence-based, there is so much evidence that is out there, is that continuing to grow to showing us what works for people. And this goes across the board, across cognitive behavioral therapy, across other sorts of therapy, not just with people who offend. There is that evidence base, and that evidence base can inform our practice also. So with that, it's thinking about, okay, so how do we move from criminal behaviour to pro-social behaviour? So to start off with open conversations, thinking about, again, those good lives, thinking about the risk, need, responsivity. What can we do, or what does this person actually want to change? So having that conversation can be really, really important to build up that rapport, but also to find out what is it someone actually wants. And with that, thinking about goal setting. So setting goals with an individual that are more pro-social and less criminal. And again, the needs could be the same, but the activity and the goal is going to be slightly different. Using formulation. I've got loads of videos on here about how you formulate and how you can understand someone better through formulation. But a formulation is, simply put, it's a map of you. It's looking at what is the current difficulty, what's kept it going, what maybe made you more vulnerable to that difficulty developing in the first place, and what are maybe the triggers. And then thinking about what is someone's strengths and really focusing on that. You never want to ignore the good things about a person, because we all have them. Sometimes it's about finding them. Looking at risk. So as I said, with the responsivity and the risk element, that we want to ensure that we are managing risk and we're reducing risk. In forensic psychology, that isn't all that we do, but it is a main kind of feature of our assessments and our interventions. Having that career and education development, so thinking about, are there goals, are there kind of things that an individual wants to do but they haven't been able to do previously in life, so what can we develop? And it may not be kind of just educational development, it could be like that, building those social skills, any sort of skills that an individual may be lacking because they haven't had a chance to develop it, or even just life skills. If someone's been in prison for a massive chunk of their time, the world changes so quickly. So it's about maybe exploring, okay, so what is it that you need to kind of know to reintegrate into society well, and to not return to engaging in criminal behaviour. And within that, there may be substance use difficulties. So that could be something that when we use substances, that sometimes we are more likely to engage in criminal behaviour if that has been a feature. Maybe substance use has been something that an individual uses as a coping skill, so they don't know any other ways of coping. Psychoeducation is something that I think is really important, and that's just pretty much explaining the psychology behind either the treatment that we're using or things that we're explaining, such as a psychoeducation behind trauma and what that can do to your brain, and how if someone's had a traumatic upbringing or they've had traumatic experiences, that can actually change the makeup of what's going on inside their brain. And sometimes I found by just explaining that to an individual can have a massive impact on their own understanding of themselves and their behaviour. Restorative justice, I spoke about that on a previous page, but then having a strength-based approach. So again, it's not the finger point, it's not the punishment, it's about looking at someone's strengths and what we can do to help someone to continue to build those strengths. And within that comes confidence building, that sometimes people just may lack confidence in certain areas. So maybe it could be about building confidence in going to maybe job interviews, or engaging in positive relationships, or even just confidence in themselves. And then specific offence reduction work. So these are just some ideas. Obviously, that's not everything that would support someone to move from engaging in criminal behaviour to pro-social behaviour, but they can be a really good starting point. And as I said, not everything is going to be suitable for everyone, and that's okay. So as professionals, thinking about some of the difficulties that an individual could experience when you're actually working with people who engage in offending behaviour. So we can experience secondary trauma. So thinking about secondary trauma is when we become re-traumatised or traumatised by what we are hearing, what we are reading, what we are seeing. Even though that we didn't experience that trauma ourselves, by seeing it and hearing about it, we can actually lead to us having traumatic experience, which can even lead to post-traumatic stress disorder if not untreated. Then compassion fatigue, I've got another video explaining about that. That's kind of when we use up all our compassion with the people that we work with, and we just don't have any left even to give to the people outside of work. Then burnout, so when our levels of stress and responsibilities are just too much and we aren't able to function properly at work or at home. It can also cause vicarious trauma. So this is slightly different to secondary trauma. But there is a very close link. And this is where a therapist or someone who is working with individuals who offend, their inner experiences become negatively transformed. And this is because they listen and empathize with another person's trauma, which can lead to cognitive change. So it's that impact of seeing, hearing trauma. But unlike with secondary trauma, it could be about reading case files or seeing pictures of offending. Vicarious trauma can be through when we're talking to an individual and when we are working with them. And the cognitive changes, they can change because it can change how we see ourselves, how we think, how we engage with other people. And this can be particularly when we're thinking about safety, control, and trust. So, and these cognitive changes become more dominant. So we could maybe feel quite safe and quite in control and trusting of others, because that's kind of what our life has taught us. But then engaging in working with this work, that those areas may start to shift, that we may kind of realise that we're not so much in control of our own fate as we much thought, or people aren't as trustworthy. It's again thinking about these difficulties and being aware of them. And then an increased use of negative coping mechanisms, so that we may start to drink alcohol more, we start maybe not to eat as healthily, we may not look after our body as much. And we're doing so because maybe we're just shattered and we haven't got the ability to think of anything that is as helpful, as healthy for us, and we kind of revert back to the quick and easy ones. And then it can cause difficulties in all relationships, but particularly with the ones that we probably spend the most time with, so with romantic or sexual relationships. Arguably, this can be even more so if we're working with people who sexually offend. But there can be those difficulties, whether that is a reduction in sex drive, that kind of detachment from other people. But it's all being able to understand what these difficulties are. And it's not to say that everyone will experience them. I think the research says about only 75% of people don't. But it's about being aware of them and being able to recognise them in ourselves and do something about it. So one of the last things I wanted to explain was the importance of a therapeutic relationship. So a therapeutic relationship is, regardless for what sort of intervention you're using or the model that you're using, the success of working with an individual, no matter if they've offended or not, in fact, that that therapeutic relationship can be pivotal in getting good outcomes, or kind of getting an individual to go through therapy. And it can be really important because it provides that individual that dress rehearsal sometimes of knowing how to interact with other people, how to have a genuine relationship, whose caring is indestructible. So that no matter kind of what an individual throws at them, I'm not saying that that's okay, but they can learn to build pro-social, healthy relationships, potentially for someone that hasn't had the chance to do that before. And if we're kind of thinking about some of the Jungian theory, and this is about to suggest to position yourself opposite your client and not behind like Freud, so kind of almost like we're kind of a teamwork, rather than kind of being that individual that kind of sits behind and just observes, that you're part of that journey, that therapeutic relationship, and then thinking about kind of what you label the individual that you work in. And kind of the Jungian school of mind is that it's not a patient. So thinking about what language you actually choose to use. So that's all that I wanted to cover today. So here is a list of references, and I will put them in the caption box as well. But I hope you found that helpful. As you may know, that I've had experience of working with this client group for over 10 years now. If there is anything in particular that you'd like me to cover next or to explain, then please drop it in the comments. But as always, thank you for listening. Please like and subscribe and share. Thank you.